So once again, it's good to have you here on my podcast, Melissa. And I would like to tell my viewers that Melissa is an instructional designer, 10 plus years of experience in learning and development specialist in professional development programs, engaging presentations, instructional design, and data analyst. And she has taught English for 9 years in public education. Am I right, Melissa?
Yes, yep.
And so, yeah, tell me something about your work. And also, like I read a lot about you that you are kind of a person who never, like you are so much into productivity. Without work, you feel like, you are feeling like you do not feel like yourself. I read it somewhere. So tell me all the things about it.
Yeah. So this job keeps me pretty busy. One thing I really like about what I do is that every day is a little bit different.
Hmm.
There is no real set schedule of my day. What I do really varies based on what needs to be done. So each day there's something new that I have to tackle, different people I need to meet with, different things I need to organize and plan. And I really like the idea of being busy and kind of keeping my mind occupied. That's something that I really liked about teaching when I taught. It was very similar as far as you constantly kind of had to be on your feet. So this is a different format, but it still does present those challenges on a daily basis that I need to find solutions for. I also really like sometimes getting a question that I don't necessarily know the answer to right away because I like learning how to do a new skill or figuring out a new concept that I didn't know before. So when people reach out to me with questions and they apologize, I say, no, 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 I'm glad we're learning this together. So I really embrace those kinds of learning experiences. And I think that it's something that makes my job interesting and it keeps it kind of fresh as the days go on.
Makes sense. And how was the transition as you taught English for 9 years and you've been an instructional designer for, I guess, 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. So how
Yes.
was the transition of that?
The transition was really interesting because I was used to having a much more rigid schedule when I was teaching.
Mhm.
When I was teaching, there was very little downtime over the course of the day. You were kind of going, going, going all the time. And oftentimes, as someone who taught English, I brought a lot of work home, in particular grading. So it was a job in which I never really felt like I was fully disconnecting, which was one of the reasons that I explored a new career is I needed a more clear division between my work life and my home life. So going to a job now in which I do things, I'm still busy, I still get things done, but then I can go home and separate what I was doing at work with what I'm doing with my family was a real game changer for me as far as just mental health, as far as me being able to compartmentalize different sections of my life. It was a very good choice for me specifically to be able to do that. Especially as someone who has young children at home, this was something that was just really important for me to be able to do.
Makes sense. Wow. And now I guess you have finally figured out work-life balance, right?
Yes, yes. I definitely feel like I've figured that out a lot more than I had before. I feel like this job makes it easier for me to prioritize my family and my life outside of work, as opposed to teaching is something that is such a passion project. But I feel like what happens sometimes with teaching is it becomes all of who you are. It really absorbs your entire personality. And I think maybe just at this juncture in my life, I just kind of had a moment where do I want my entire life to be defined by my job, or do I want to figure out more of who I am outside of my work life? And I did leave my teaching job post COVID, and I feel like the COVID pandemic left a lot of people with a lot of time to reflect on what are my priorities and what is important. And so for me, having that moment of I need to reevaluate what I really feel is important, that led to a different kind of experience for me, or leading to me wanting a career change.
Intriguing. But this job of yours, it's also not a piece of cake. Like you have to do a lot of things, right? It's not easy.
Yes.
Uh, And I like how do you deal with AI? Like, do you think that AI will like if I tell you honestly, like do you I feel like it's gonna hinder the creativity of students. So how do you like what's your take on it in terms of AI?
Absolutely. AI is something that is being discussed all the time. It is definitely one of the bigger priorities right now amongst faculty as far as what they want to know about what they can do. So we started having more discussions about AI last year, especially because we started giving recommendations to faculty that at the very least they need to have addressed in their syllabus how they view AI, especially in relation to plagiarism. Because if you're taking words from a language model server and that's not your voice, that's not your words. And something that is really rewarding about teaching is that you get to see what your student voice is. So, with this implementation of AI, because students are so afraid to not be perfect, what they're doing, maybe unintentionally, is they're stripping away the part that makes them interesting, that has their voice and has their identity. So, we started talking about how do we want to tackle that in our classes. We do, we did have discussed at this point that it's not really going away. So how is the best way to have these conversations with students? I think one thing that's really important is not to minimize it, not to dismiss it and think that students just aren't going to use it. I think at this point you need to address AI and the fact that it exists with students. But then talk about maybe the inherent value of what are you not learning when you use AI, or making sure that students understand that their voice is valuable, and that is something that is kind of a deeply human thing, is using their own voice. Some faculty members are very comfortable with students using it for certain areas of a project, maybe getting initial ideas, sparking an initial outline, things like that, that aren't necessarily still taking away their voice, but just providing some idea generation. Some people are fine with incorporating some use of it as long as they are citing some of their sources or sourcing it. Some faculty members even use it as they have computer coding classes, and sometimes they'll use it, but they actually use it in a very interesting way to point out that AI is not always correct. So they'll put in formulas and then they'll say, as you can see, this model doesn't know everything. It's trying to take cues from various websites and various algorithms and things like that, but it's not always accurate. So they actually use it also to point out some of the inaccuracies of tech, that you can't rely on things like this all the time because it's not giving you real information. So I think at this point, some of it boils down to real life conversations. I do know that more and more faculty are switching to more in-class writing assignments, so kind of going backwards a little bit as far as things that maybe we thought we'd gotten past, which was like paper to pen to paper writing. And so people are going back to that more so they can make sure at least they have mini samples of student, voice work, so they can use it as a comparative thing if a student turns in a big project and they say, hey, this doesn't sound familiar. But also just for students to get a little bit more of that brain work going when they're actually writing something on a piece of paper. Because you do see a lot more. I mean, there have been a lot of studies done on this that, note taking physically does help you retain more information. Just the same as writing and expressing your thoughts that way does do a lot more with the cognitive functions of your brain. So I think it's still trying to be important to kind of keep harping the importance of utilizing your brain. Otherwise, that part's going to weaken. I think they just had an MIT study about that, that showed that students who were using ChatGPT or other AI models, parts of their brain were weakening as a result of not using it. So the idea of making sure that we're still keeping our intelligence sharp and using those parts of our brain that can't be replicated by a computer. So yeah, I think the big thing with AI is just making sure you're having active conversations, understanding that it's really going to be hard to get in front of this technology. So at this point, the best thing is to work and learn alongside your students and have some common conversations and some authentic conversations to figure out what's going to create the best learning for them.
Really. And Melissa, do you think that in terms of teachers, like I'm often, curious and I'm often concerned also, like when it comes to AI. I feel like in the future, teachers' job will be replaced by AIs and robots. Like they would be able to teach in the classrooms, and there won't be the need of teachers unless and until there is one thing that people often claim, that there is a thing called human touch, which AI won't be able to provide. But other than that, I feel like AI can be better than teachers itself in terms of vast knowledge and all. So, what's your take on it? Do you think it has the capacity to replace teachers itself?
Hmm. I think that um, I still, maybe it's just because I'm an optimist, but I do believe there's something about the human sense of self that really can't be replicated by a robot. Because teaching is not just communicating information about a certain subject or a certain
Right.
content matter to students. So much of what makes teaching kind of special and important is those interactions, those real human experiences with students. And I think that was another thing that came from the COVID pandemic. It wasn't just that students were falling behind in content, it was that they became completely rewired as far as how to have social interactions
Yeah.
because they weren't having those social interactions in the classroom. And so you're seeing some generations of students who really are unfamiliar with how to have interactive conversations with others in a real world setting. And so I think, if nothing else, that really demonstrates the fact that we really need people led by another human being having these interactions and having these moments of reassurance and having these real world things that aren't just something that can be replicated by a computer system. And so I do feel like, it's not going to get all the way there. Like, I think there are people that will try. However, if that really was going to work, then we would have seen much more success post COVID or during the COVID era when students were initially being taught by Zoom screens. But you saw students lagging behind and you saw students falling back as a result of maybe not having that physical presence of an instructor who was helping them out more physically and in the space and guiding them. Because I don't think an AI model is going to say to a student, do your work. And if a student says no, the robot just moves on, right? It's not going to continue having those conversations or going off human cues. And the ability to read verbal and nonverbal body language is, I don't know if there's going to be, I mean, again, this is me being an optimist. I don't know if there's ever going to be a robot version of a human being who can read things like verbal and nonverbal cues. And I think if you get to that point, then what is the point of us continuing as a human society, you know?
Wow. Yeah. And I hope that your optimism will work. I am in the favor of that. And I'm not sure about the curriculum or syllabus that you guys have in the United States, but in India, like up to 10th grade, we are supposed to follow the same curriculum course. Like, if I tell you honestly, when I was a child, when I used to study, I used to abhor maths, it was never my cup of tea. And after 10th grade, I wanted to be like, do something in context of arts and literature and that. So my point is like, when it comes to maths, I always used to think that I wasted a lot of my time studying maths, but now I don't even have to use it. Like, why the hell do I need to prove a triangle is triangle or a Pythagoras theorem? So, what's your take on it? Do you have the same thing in the United States where students are compelled to do it, or what's the structure over there?
Oh, absolutely. So in K through 12, which is what we call in the public school system kindergarten through 12th grade, so primary, secondary education, there is a common core curriculum that students are expected to, or teachers, school districts are expected to follow. They can vary a little bit based on state guidelines and state regulations. And definitely there are students, I used to have that all the time. I taught English. I used to say it's a very polarizing subject. You like it, you don't like it, but it doesn't negate the fact that it is necessary and a life skill. But as someone who was always an English major, kind of English based, I would say the same thing about math, geometry, for example. And I would say, I don't know why I need to learn this. Like, this will never be applicable to me. And I'll never forget, actually, when I was in geometry, I asked my teacher, why would I ever need to know this? And she said, well, if you're going to be a geometry teacher. And
Hmm.
that stuck with me forever because I was immediately disengaged. So when I became a teacher, I made sure to never do that, and always point to different skills that you were learning, not the, how it was going to impact your career. So things like critical thinking, identifying reputable sources, the ability to rationalize an argument, the ability to break apart conversations. All of those things are really important skills. So I do believe that even though I, like you said, have not completed like an algebraic equation for anything, and I don't need it for my job, there are certain logical steps and that kind of thing. And I feel like when instructors are leading their subject, if they get that student who is asking that kind of question, why should I care? You need to have some sort of real world skill building. Okay, well, this is actually enhancing your critical thinking skills. This is actually enhancing your logical skills for, and then if you can think of like a job or a real world something that you could connect it to, that's always a little more helpful, like some sort of real world application. I used to teach, I don't know if you, but I used to do speech, and speech was always a really scary one for students because they, public speaking, I would tell them is, I don't know if you, public speaking, fear of public speaking is the number one fear. Um, in I think the world, I don't know, public speaking is the number one, death is number two. So people are more afraid of speaking in public than dying. So I would tell students that, like it is actually a verifiable fact that people would rather die than speak in public. I said, however, like when you're doing a job interview or something like that, you need to be able to speak clearly and confidently, and you need to be able to address other people. And as far as things like group work, I told them, in the real world, you don't get to always just hang out with your friends. You need to be able to interact with other people. So if I ever got students who were like, I don't want to be grouped with so and so and so and so,
Wow.
I said, you have to work with people that you may not get along with very well all the time.
Wow.
That is a real world life skill.
Mhm.
So I would try to make those connections to real world life skills as much as I could with my subject. And I would say for other instructors, making those connections as much as possible is going to help, keep students from disconnecting like I did when I was told, well, you could just be a geometry teacher. Making sure that they're aware of implications that maybe they don't see right away, but they can look in the future and go, okay, I could see how maybe that might benefit me at some point.
Really? Wow. I never thought from this perspective. Wow. You spoke volumes. Interesting, Melissa. And when it comes to like your personal life, what are the things that you like to do in your spare time? Be it any hobby or any sort of things, like the things that you like to do to wind down, simply.
Yeah, sure. I really like to read. Again, English major. I find that I actually rediscovered reading for fun during the pandemic because I feel like I was spending way too much time, as many people were, on my screen, kind of doom scrolling. So that idea of just like looking at the bad news and getting very absorbed in that bad news. And I think at some point I finally kind of stepped back and I thought, this is not healthy. Like, you need to find a different hobby. And I just went back and reread an old book series that I had really liked as a younger person and really reconnected with that. And so I found that it was so much better for my brain to turn off a screen for a little bit, but also continue using my brain in such a way to escape, to go somewhere else through words. And so that is something that I still enjoy, that I'm constantly doing, is reading. It's also a habit I'm trying to communicate to my children. I'm always trying to be aware of the fact that I have younger people who are watching me at home. And so my daughter is a big reader as well. So we'll read together. My son he just learned how to read. So he's just getting into things like graphic novels. So making sure I'm also modeling that as something that I enjoy, that's something that I'm doing for fun, is really important to me. I will say I also enjoy a good, bad TV moment. However, my kids keep me so busy that I don't have a lot of downtime to do that. I do, let's see, what else do I do? I like to exercise, mostly not as much for health, but also mental health. I feel like for me, exercising and taking walks and things like that is another really nice little break for my brain. I'm finding that even, especially the older I get, the more I use exercise more for mental health aspects, it's been really helpful for me. I love trying new foods. I love going out to eat. That's a big fun thing for me. If I can find an opportunity to be social and eat good food, that's another way that I can kind of ease down. So if I can go out with my husband or if I can reconnect with some friends, socializing is also something that I really enjoy doing in my downtime.
Interesting. And what sort of books? Can you name those books, Melissa, that are your favorites?
Oh gosh, I read so many books. So, what are some ones that I really enjoy? I just read a book. It won the Pulitzer a couple of years ago called Demon Copperhead.
Mm,
That was a really good book.
David
Uh,
Copperfield? David?
yeah, Demon Copperhead is what it's called. It's actually a modern retelling of David Copperfield,
Okay, go
but it's about a boy who's growing up in the mountains of Appalachia, especially during like the opioid crisis. I really liked that book a lot because he had a very distinctive narrative voice. It reminded me a lot of the first time I read Catcher in the Rye when I was in high school. And there was a very, very distinct voice. It was a book that when I read it, I was envious of the author because of the way she was writing. I was like, I want to know how to write like that. It was just an incredible, incredible read. What are some other books that I really like? I really like historical fiction. I like a lot of historical fiction. So I really like The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna is really good. That's a book about two sisters in Nazi occupied France in World War II. So that's a book that was incredibly emotional. I got a lot out of that one. I love the book Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. That's about two friends who build a video game together in the 90s and the evolution of their friendship. And I'm somebody who loves books that have really well, richly developed characters. And that book has such incredible character development that you feel so deeply for the characters and every choice and decision that they make. So I'm a big person who I love multifaceted and complicated characters. That's a really big one for me. And so any book that really has deep layers in it that I can kind of pick through, I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I read a lot of different things, kind of depending on mood or what's in. Oh, I just read one that I really liked called The Measure. Which was kind of a fun one. I like dystopian or kind of futuristic. This one was about a time in our society when people received a box at their doorstep when they turn 22 or above. And in each box is a piece of string. And the piece of string determines the length of your life,
Oh,
what's
wow.
left in your life. So people became quickly grouped into long stringers and short stringers. And it talked about some of the political implications of that, like the way short stringers were treated. But it also, deeply reflected on if you knew the length of life you had, how would that impact how you decided to live the rest of your life? So I also like books like that that breed a lot of interesting discussion. That was a big one. One more, and then I'll be done with. One more that I really liked along that lens was the book Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Dark Matter is fantastic. It's a sci-fi one, and that's based on the premise that every choice that you make creates an alternate universe in which the choice that you don't make happens and plays out.
Oh,
And so it's this guy, and he gets pulled into a separate universe in which he decided to not get with his wife, and he instead decided to focus on his career. And then he has to look through all the different universes to find the one that he was initially in. And it bred some really great discussion about kind of revisiting every choice that you've made in your life and thinking, okay, if I hadn't done this, how might my life have turned out? So I love reflective stuff like that as well.
intriguing. And what about movies? Are you into this kind of science fiction, historical films as well, or simply books, Melissa?
Let's see. I mean, I really like, generally when I'm watching movies, I also like to kind of escape. So I'll watch a drama, but oftentimes I watch comedies, just so I can laugh. I watch a lot of the same old one. Like, I really love 90s era movies. I love Chris Farley. I love Adam Sandler 90s movies. Those, really, I have a soft spot for those. They always make me laugh whenever I watch them. I really like campy horror movies. So horror movies that aren't really that scary. I love those as well. I get really into those around Halloween season. I love Freddy Krueger movies.
Oh,
They're some of my
okay.
favorites. Love Freddy Krueger. I really like the Halloween movies. I
Hmm.
really like
Candy Curtis.
I like the Evil Dead movies.
Oh,
So, yeah, like the 80s, 90s kind of slasher
slasher,
films, I'm
yeah.
also really into. Yeah.
Oh, those are my
So,
favorites. Wow.
yeah.
I guess Halloween, then there is that also like Scream, then Final Destination. Uh,
Yes.
then there was this film, So I guess that was pretty horrific. Have you watched
Yes.
those films? So, Melissa, SAW, So, the series of
Sorry,
So,
which one? Oh,
So,
Saw?
yeah. Have
Yeah.
you
I
watched
remember the first time I loved the first one. The first time I saw it, I did not anticipate the ending at all, and my jaw dropped. I was so surprised by the ending. So I love that kind of stuff where I had no idea that was coming. And I won't spoil it in case someone what but that was a really fun one. I do feel like those movies kind of got more and more like bloody and graphic and kind of lost the
those?
initial like suspense of the first one, but that first one was a really fun one to watch. Yeah.
Definitely. And Evil Dead also. It's like it's really horrifying. The last part. Have you watched the last part? I guess back in 2011 or something. Evil.
Yeah.
That was yeah. That was pretty horrific. And wow, nice. And wow, intriguing. Like you have good taste in movies as well.
Yeah.
Halloween, yeah. Halloween. Then there are lots of Scream. As I told you, Scream is there. Then pretty some 90s movies like I Know What You Did Last Summer. That was also quite good.
They just came out with a remake of that one, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it is. What else? What other films that you can think of, Melissa, that you can watch a lot of times and never get tired of it?
Probably the movie that I can watch a million times and it never gets old is the original Jurassic Park.
Jurassic
That
Park.
is one of my favorite, it might be my favorite movie of all time. I
Wow,
think it is perfect. I've watched all the sequels, but the original is so, so good. Every time I watch it, I'm still in awe that it came out over 30 years ago because I think the artistry that went into it is so incredible. I love the musical score. We actually, my husband especially, he has a vinyl collection, and he got me the vinyl of Jurassic Park score, which is incredible. I can just listen to it anytime. I love the acting. I love the whole thing. Something else that I like, and this is a little, is I love, yeah, MonsterVerse movies. So like Godzilla, King Kong, the movies when they're fighting or paired up. I always love to go watch these I love to watch them on the big screen. So I'll go to a movie theater for those, and then I will probably not watch them again. But I love watching those big monsters on a big screen. I get a little kick out of that.
nice. And who are your favorite actors and actresses, Melissa?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think of someone that I just really enjoy. Hmm. Yeah, I think like Chris Farley in the 90s movies like never fails to make me laugh. I feel like any movie that he was in, I just loved. Um, Gosh, I'm not sure if I have like who else comes to mind as far as favorite. I'm sure someone will come to mind as soon as I'm done. Jeff Goldblum. Love Jeff Goldblum. Oh, that's another one that I love, the movie Roadhouse.
Roadhouse, okay.
Roadhouse? The
The
original one from the 80s.
okay,
Yeah.
original one. Got it.
Yeah, because I love Sam Elliott,
Mhm.
who is in that movie. Yeah. So as far as actresses, I'm not sure. Yeah, I feel like I just watch random comedies or anything like that as they pop up. I loved Ryan Gosling in the Barbie movie. Actually, that was one of my.
Wow.
I laughed a lot at that movie. Actually, that was something that I didn't anticipate it being as funny as it was. And I thought that movie was so funny. I rewatched it on a plane recently, and I was like, "This is still really funny." I was cracking up when I was watching it. It was really an enjoyable. It was an enjoyable watch. I wasn't sure if it was still going to hold up after a couple of years, but I still found it extremely funny.
Intriguing. Wow. Wow, that was nice list of films. And on that note, Melissa, I guess I won't hold you any longer. It was really nice having this fruitful conversation with you, and you shared some genuine and insightful insights with me and my viewers. So thank you for being a part of this podcast, and we will catch up soon again for part two of
Yes,
this.
of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care, Melissa. Bye.
Yes, bye.